Life after the Rams with Colin Gibson.
Welcome back to Life After the Rams. This is episode 17. We're heading to 95-96 when Jim Smith's Derby were Premier League bound. At its heart of the side was captain Robin van der Laan, the driving force, and the man who scored that goal that took Derby County into the Premier League. Life After the Rams is supported by 7 Restaurant and Cafe Bar in Derby and Rams Trust, the Derby County Supporters Society, established to promote good governance and fan engagement. They welcome new membership applications from all supporters. Just visit ramstrust.org.uk/membership for further details.
Life after the Rams with Colin Gibson.
Robin, as we do this recording, it's pretty much to the day since that goal against Crystal Palace to take Derby into the Premier League. Does it seem 30 years ago or just last week?
It's sometimes it feels just like last week, but it's amazing that 30 years have gone by since that moment. It's incredible how time flies.
Where does it stand in your career?
It's probably the biggest few seconds of my football career. Every player will have a few moments in their career where they look back on and say, I was lucky to be in the right moment at the right place in the right moment. And, sometimes it's a case of, you score a great goal, you make a good tackle, you win a championship. So these moments define your career. And this was definitely, one of my biggest moments of my career.
And it really just put the finishing touch to what was some season.
Yeah, incredible season. My first at the club. We had a slow start and, picked up after about 10 games and gone on an unbelievable unbeaten run. And, absolutely fantastic season. Personally, myself, I had the honour of captaining the team. Obviously the goal was a big moment, for the club and the supporters and myself, and it was just an unbelievable season.
The baseball ground had seen many great afternoons, many great nights, football leagues being won there, European football won there. But maybe the win over Crystal Palace, though you did have a year in the Premier League and there were some interesting games there, maybe that was the last great hurrah for the baseball ground, that win over Palace.
Yeah, absolutely. The importance of that game, the tension, the build-up, it felt like a special game. Completely different to any other game that season, and for us to come out on top on that day was just a fantastic feeling.
It wasn't the last game of the season, there was a backstop, but you just knew that if you beat Palace, who were also in contention, that was it. You could sit in the dressing room, drink champagne and have a cigar. Yes,
and we did, as you well know. Yes, we raided Jim Smith's cupboard. We got the big Havanas out, I think they were. It was, great. We had a great group of lads there. The team spirit was fantastic. We had good socials together as well as playing hard on the pitch. So it was an amazing season, for all the players involved. Definitely.
And was that just the release, we've done the job, we're going into the Premier League, we've got over the tension, we're now just going to enjoy it before the real work starts again? Because as you say, there was a lot of tension going into that game.
Yeah, there was. We were, sort of stumbling over the line a little bit. We've had, a couple of sort of poorer results. We weren't playing as fluid as we were before. I remember myself, I was injured for the last 6 weeks and getting by on just painkillers, no training. It was just loading up on the Friday before the game and getting through the games. And there was one or two players like that that were struggling a little bit with niggles and just battling through just to get us over the line.
And how was Jim Smith's blood pressure by this point?
Well, his face was getting redder and redder, I think, so he was, even in the interview after the game, he was nearly tackling the winger himself, he was that excited. But he was obviously a fantastic manager for us and a fantastic person as well. So, for him to do that in his first season as well was amazing.
And it was quite the combination. Jim Smith, the experienced old-timer who never quite sort of got over a winning line, but had got all that experience. And then Steve McLaren, who was starting to make his name in coaching.
Yeah, Steve was a great coach. Exactly sort of what we needed with Jim Smith, because Jim was always the person that knew players, bring players in, was always able to get players over the line, rebuilding the team. We've lost some really good, experienced players in that summer. He had to recycle the funds into players like myself and other players that were coming in, and without having to break in the bank for anyone, recycle the money, and it took a little bit of time to get settled and get familiar with each other's qualities, really.
And you got to basically get it right, as you say, because there wasn't spare money flying around.
No, there wasn't a lot. I think when Igor came in, they splashed out a little bit, probably gone a little bit over what they intended to spend. But obviously that again was another masterstroke.
What about when he first came into the baseball grounds, swaggering in, I'm sure, in that very confident Croatian manner that we got used to? What was your first impressions?
Well, it was different because suddenly you're bringing international football players through the door, and that straight away speaks volumes. So the respect was instantly there. If you can do it as a captain as well, he was captain for Croatia. If you can do it for a nation like Croatia, who always had fantastic footballers, then he's going to bring quality to the team. Apart from that, disastrous debut, I think we can all agree that he made a massive impact on the season.
Yeah, it's always said, just to remind, that it was 5-1 at Tranmere and Igor scored the solitary goal. But did it give Jim the excuse, or did it give him the thought that this isn't working, how we're defending? We're going to put Igor as a sweeper and it should work from there. And boy, did it work. I'm not saying that was the only masterstroke, because it was then 20-odd games unbeaten.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all realised that Igor is not the right player in a back four, being a central defender, marking players. He was not that kind of player. He was one that bring calmness to the team. He can sweep around two proper centre backs, and for him to step in with the ball and start spreading the ball around and just bring that confidence to the whole back line. So the Tranmere game was a blessing in disguise, because if we would have sneaked a draw there, it might have pursued with a back four, and we might have never known how good it could be with the three centre backs.
And again, fair play to Jim, because he brought in new faces like yourself, Ronnie Williams, Darryl Powell, to mention just three. I suppose I'll add Gary Rowett into that list as well. But there were some players who'd been there from the team that had lost in the playoff final 2 years previous to Leicester, and he seemed just to be able to mould you all together.
Yeah, and I think that was a big quality of him. His personality was huge, as you well know, Colin. So I think that's where his strength is. His strength wasn't necessarily being the coach on the coaching ground. That was Steve McLaren's sort of job, and that tells you the strength of the man as well, because he brings in experts in that certain department where he is not the expert himself, rather than thinking you know it all. And, he was a great wheeler and dealer, bringing players in. He knew everybody, all around the country. He knew his players. So that was his strength. And, his personality, he was always liked by the players. I hear stories, and Gary Rowett, the last time we met up was saying that, he was dropped for a game, and, he was so angry, knocking on the door and getting in the office was going to give him hell. And then he walked out, feeling quite good about it all. And he was just dropped for the Saturday. So, he had a real knack of making people wanted. And, I've had the same scenario when, one game you weren't playing. It was a case of, no, I'm saving you for it because I really need you for that next game, because that's an important one. And, you're walking out and going, I was so angry beforehand, but I feel okay about it now. So it makes you feel. His man management basically was fantastic.
And when you signed, he basically said to you, "You're going to be my captain."
Yeah, because I provisionally signed for West Bromwich Albion. I was training there for a week already, but in them days it had to go to tribunal to see what the transfer fee was going to be. Obviously, Jim contacted Paul Vale and spoke to John Rudge. He offered, a decent fee plus Lee Mills, and John Rudge was really excited about that deal. So I went up to see Jim at the baseball ground and to see what he had to say. And his first thing is saying, "Listen, I need you at this club. I'm building something special, and I want you to be my captain." And when somebody gives you that much confidence in your first conversation with him, I'm thinking, if I'm going to be captain, I'm not going to sit on the bench. So at least I get to start the season, with some good players in this fantastic club. So my mind was made up straight away, and this is where I wanted to be.
How were West Brom about it?
They were disappointed. I went back to them and spoke to them again, and the managers spoke to the chairman, and they basically upped their ante, and they offered me a significant amount more to play for West Brom, and obviously I made up my mind, but I felt I owed it to him to go and speak to Alan Buckley, who was the manager at the time, and made up my mind that I was going to go to Derby County.
So the money actually didn't make any difference?
No. I know how close they've been in the past. The previous years, I knew they were quite big spenders in the division prior to we came to the club. So I thought, if we're going to have a chance of getting promotion to the Premier League, this is probably the best club to be at. In the what was then the first division.
Yeah, well, that certainly was the case. What about the whole game of the Palace match? How much do you remember of that? Or is it all about you score the goal and then it's just hanging on to see this game out?
Yeah, it's most games, you just get so involved in the game. Sometimes, you feel like we played quite well as a team and people saying, "Oh, we were awful," and the other way around. You'll see bits of the game through your eyes, but other people will see it differently. I know it was a real tense affair, and I know Palace started better than us. They looked like, well, they were chasing us. They had nothing to lose. We had everything to lose in that game. So yeah, I knew that we won the game, which was massive. Did we play particularly well? I wouldn't say no, but that was all irrelevant. At the end of the day, it was all about the 3 points and getting into that, in that promotion.
Final whistle goes. There's a rather famous photo, isn't there, of when the final whistle goes?
I don't know if it's famous, but it was funny as hell. We're all bouncing, of course, and the fans came onto the pitch in a big pitch invasion, and we're getting hugs of everything, and grown men kissing you on the head and whatever. And Gary Rowe jumped on my back, and I was just running around with him while he was on the piggyback, and a photo was captured at that particular moment. We were both with beaming smiles on our faces. But the next day, that was in the paper, and it says Robbie van der Laan celebrates promotion with a fan. So Gary got some stick for that, as you can imagine. But he mentioned it the other day when we met, didn't we? He mentioned it. I never bring it up, but he doesn't mind bringing it up, so I'm sure he won't mind.
Yeah, it just captured the moment, and in a way, maybe if there was innocence still around in the 1990s, that somebody actually didn't realise that he was a player.
Yeah, and a good one as well. He was a good player as well. So he had a big impact in the season as well.
So into the Premier League, is this where you then have to start not justifying yourself to Jim, but convincing them that you have got a place? You've got something still to give in the top division.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mentioned that I was playing with painkillers the last 6 games of the season, and I had a really bad ankle, and over the summer it wasn't healing up as quick as I wanted to. So when pre-season started, I was still on the sidelines. I couldn't do the pre-season. So straight away, you'll end up starting the season not being involved because of your injury. So you look back at it sometimes and you go, yes, was it all worth it? Trying to play through and maybe help the team get promotion. But then that first game of the season in the Premier League, you're not even involved in the game. And then, it's a difficult one to swallow. Obviously, as captain, you lose captaincy. You're still catching up fitness-wise, so it's a difficult one, but still very much worth it. You just got to roll your sleeves up, and once you're fit, you work hard in training, and when you get a chance, you try to make sure and convince people that you should be on the pitch. And I've managed to get some games, in the Premier League as well, which I was very proud of.
It was almost as if when Derby got into the second half of that first season in the Premier League, and it got a bit tough at times, that I wouldn't say Jim Smith came back to you, but you proved your point that you were more than worthy of being in that team in the top division.
Yeah, it wasn't proving a point, really. Jim knew what I could bring to the team, that's what I brought to the team the year before. And, sometimes when the going gets tough, you need some people that are good at helping other players on the pitch. Not necessarily all about, my own performance, but if I can make other players play 10% better, then that creates a massive impact. And, in general, people don't see that from the stands, but Jim and Steve McLaren and Bill Beswick, who's the psychologist at the time, they knew what I could bring, and that sort of steadied the ship a little bit, I believe. So so you just get on with it. There's no need to moan about it. It's football. When you're not on the team, you help everybody else to perform to the best of their ability, and when you get your chance, then you hope other players will do the same for you.
Derby move on to Pride Park, but by this time, your time with Derby is starting to draw to a close. Yeah,
we obviously had the opening of the stadium, which was a fantastic sort of event with the Queen. And once you get into the situation where there was a lot of international football players coming in, there was a lot of players from abroad, good footballers coming in. Struggled a little bit with injury. I had another ankle injury I picked up against Man United on the home game. And then it's a 6 months layoff. And then sometimes, you feel like you do get forgotten a bit, because if you're not there fighting for a place, then people would just ask you, how's it going? How long do you think you'll be? And that's sort of it. So I knew that there was something on the cards that I might move on to another club. But still, I wanted to play for Derby County. Still want to roll my sleeves up, and when called upon, you do your job.
You eventually, though, move on to Barnsley. You did have a short spell with Wolves, didn't you, as well?
Yeah, I went there on loan for a month. Originally, it was going to be 3 months, but it was a month, which was a bit of a strange one, really, because I went there for a month, played 7 games. Mark McGee was the manager, and he mentioned, "Well, we want to sign you for another 2 months. We want to sign you permanently, but we haven't got the money at the moment. Can you sign another 2 months?" I've had a chat with Jim Smith. He's okay with it. He said, "And after 2 months, we'll pay a fee for you." So I think they paid about 50 grand for as a loan fee, and he said, "We will pay the fee at the end of the 2 months." And I agreed with that. If I was going to leave Derby County in the Premiership and go to a Championship club, then Wolves is probably one of the best ones around. I had a good time there while I was there, and then I never played a game again, which was absolutely crazy. No explanation given. And a couple of weeks into it, I tried to speak to him for 2 weeks, and I just had to knock on the door, and that typical scenario where the secretary goes, "No, he's busy," and I just went straight through the door and I said, "Listen, if this is the way it's going, I'm going back to Derby County." And he basically said, "Well, I can't let you go because I'll look a bad manager to my chairman. I just paid X amount of money for you." And I went back on a Tuesday, and on the Saturday I was captain for Derby County in the Premier League, which is bizarre. Played something like 15 games. I think myself and Paul Trollope came back into the frame and steadied the ship a little bit. And I believe Bill Beswick, in his book said, "Let's get Robin back and let's see if he can help us out in the leadership department," basically. So, I had a good time then for the last 15 games. So, that would never have been if I would still be playing for Wolves. Crazy how things develop sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah. Twists and turns of football, and
yeah,
what managers and chairmen are thinking of. Well, I think we do all sometimes wonder that. That back end of the season, as I say, it got a bit tight at times, but then the results came, and you beat the likes of Chelsea, and you beat the likes of Tottenham, and then of course there's the famous win at Manchester United, and suddenly everything seems just that little bit rosier, and we're okay at this level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Man United one, we weren't expecting anything there. It's a free hit. But obviously when we won that game, we all went, we're going to be okay. That was 3 points. It's like a gift, isn't it? Not expected at all. We've rolled our sleeves up. Paolo One-Chop's debut, absolute brilliant goal he scored that day. It was just a great day all round.
So great times at Derby. Let's rewind before Derby, because you moved into English football from your time in Holland, your native country, of course, and we'll talk about that. And you end up at Port Vale, John Rudge. The two are synonymous, although he did go on, obviously, to be associated with the great rivals Stoke. But John Rudge and Port Vale were just fish and chips, weren't they? They just went together.
Yeah, they were a match made in heaven. John Rudge was another old school manager who knew how to find a player. He brought fantastic players to the club and sold them for a lot of money. And he had done that for years. He kept the club afloat, basically doing that way, working that way. And he brought me to the club. He had good contacts in Holland. My manager in Holland knew John Rudge, and I came here on trial, and I fancied being here. I love my time here. I came here for 5-6 weeks, and they liked what they saw. That was after my suspension. I had a short suspension.
How many games? Sorry,
just 14.
Go on, remind us.
No, I played centre forward, and it was still in them days. It was still a centre half, constantly elbowing in the back. Every header, and a centre forward sometimes had enough of it, and you give them one back, and that happened in the first game of the season, and the third game of the season. So the two combined, got me a decent suspension, which was disastrous for me to start off with, but it opened the door to come to England, and it's one door closes, another one opens, as they say, never really picked up another suspension of any sorts since then. So I've always liked to tackle, but they were always fair, and they're just hard, and it was allowed in England, and perhaps not so much in Holland.
How was it different culturally, lifestyle-wise, moving to England from Holland, and how different was it football-wise, moving to English football?
Well, football-wise, it was a lot more passionate. The football was a lot more intense, faster pace, bigger crowds, definitely. Was much better to play in front of 15, 20,000 rather than 3, 4, 5 in Holland. So that was a massive difference. Culturally, I think the Brits and the Dutch are similar. So we're all a little bit crazy at times, and we do like a good social, and we got the same kind of banter. So for me, that was just fitted like a glove. Instantly fell in love being here, and that's why I'm still here.
And you've never really moved out of the Potteries area, have you?
No, well, we moved to Derby. I moved to Elveston first, and then we went to Bretzel. I lived next to Keith Loring, actually, at the time. And then, from then on, when I moved to Barnsley, I had an apartment there, but we bought a house back in Stoke. So it's always been, there or thereabouts. It's only 45 minutes down the road on the A50. I never moved anywhere else, really.
Do you feel settled there? Did you immediately feel settled once you made that move?
I did. I stayed in Diggs first. The actual family I stayed with in Shelton, but near the Keele, or not Keele, Stafford University, Stoke. The people I stayed with were such nice people, and the daughter and the son-in-law, they are still our best friends now. So we've made a real connection. So that settled me into life, for 6 months here in England. And then the chairman said, I've got a little house that just came empty. You can go and live in there if you want. It was just around the corner from the stadium. And it was, a terraced house on just around the stadium. And it still had, a 50p machine for the electricity. You had to put the 50p in to get the lights on. So it wasn't a flashy football life, if you like, but I loved it. I was on my own. It was, I remember my mum and dad came over for a few days, and my mum couldn't stop crying when she drove back home. That I was living there with that little 50p machine for the electrics, but That's how you grow up, isn't it? They throw you in the deep end and see if you can swim.
All right, we'll make sure there's 50p in the meter so we can get through to the end of this conversation. That is a cracking story. Football playing careers eventually come to an end, and quite often injuries do play a part in that, and that was the case for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, we played a home game against Watford, and I just changed direction, trying to close someone down, and I heard a big crunch on my knee, I ended up doing my ACL. I came back on for another 10 minutes, played a bit longer, and heard another crunch, and I've probably done a bit more damage, but it didn't really want to come off. But yeah, that finished me off. ACL done, needed a knee reconstruction, which was done well, but the damage was there. No more cartilage back in the knee, so I was advised to finish football.
How difficult was that to take?
It's always difficult, but I was 32, nearly 33. I always remember, Steve Round at Derby County. He was a young lad when I got to the club, and he was struggling with a knee injury. And I'm thinking, he hasn't even started his career yet. So if you're 32 and you've had 14 years out of it, you just gotta be, looking in the mirror and say you've had a good run at it. You always want a bit more, but at that time I was okay with it.
Just it's life. It's, as you say, you've had the playing career, so c'est la vie. What was next?
There was two bits really. Coaching, because football was my life, so coaching was a natural progression. But we also put all our time and effort into finding a plot of land and building our own house, and we ended up doing both. And we've had such a fantastic life experience building our own house. So being on site 12 months and doing all a lot of the work ourselves, if whatever we could do. So we did that, which was a fantastic experience for us, both myself and my wife. And then the coaching started. So I started doing a little bit of Port Vale and their School of Excellence with their under 12s, and then I ended up at Moor Farm at Derby County. So I did 2-3 years there, under 15s, under 12s, and I did the under 9s when my son Jack was scouted to come into the under 9s. I ran some development groups as well, more towards Stoke. I knew a lot of good players in Stoke, young players, because my son's age. So I ended up doing some development groups at Denston or Roasters, sort of in between. A lot of good players there who were also training with Manchester United and Liverpool, and that was how it used to happen. They trained with 2 or 3 different clubs. So that was an interesting time for us with regards to the coaching side of it, and I really enjoyed my time at Derby doing that.
And then Manchester United, and a chance also to go and live and work in Canada. How did that come about?
Yeah, there was. I knew Manchester United were looking to bring coaches in for their national or international program. A friend of mine was working there, and he said, "You should apply." And I went through the whole process of getting the job. With all the interviews, and had to do some demonstration sessions, and ended up getting the job. Not long after, I ended up in Canada as international head coach for Canada, which was an incredible experience. But obviously, I had to take my son out of the Derby County Academy, and that was the end of the working in academies type of thing. So you come to a crossroads where you either go with a full professional environment with regards to talent, developing young talent at an academy, or I had the opportunity to travel the world and coach, in 25 different countries. I picked that sort of, the T section in the road, or whatever you call it. I went that way, never had any regrets.
That must have been some experience.
Yeah, I mean, going to Canada, we had a partner in Canada, and I had to do the first 3 months was basically project managing it and setting it all up, and then starting with your first sort of training courses, 10-week or 12-week courses, and it was completely sold out from day one. It was an incredible experience. Taking 4 kids there, turning up on the airport in Toronto. My wife's never been to Canada, so she fully trusted me to make the right decision. And coming out of the airport, minus 20, it was, she went, what have I done? We've got a newborn baby as well. So, yes, I still remember she went, obviously after 2 weeks of settling in, I had to start work, and my wife took the baby out to the local supermarket, and within like 300-400 yards, she had to turn around because she started having a little bit of what she thought was frostbite on the baby's face. So yeah, so she didn't enjoy that as much because I was working. She was stuck in the house. The snow was like a meter high outside, but then the spring came, and the weather is fabulous in the summer. Spring and summer, it's beautiful, and we absolutely loved it.
As we say, all things do come to an end, and the next chapter comes along. And the next chapter was your local club to your area, Newcastle Town.
Yeah, I was. I had a good experience there prior to moving to Canada. I actually played for the first team there for 5 or 6 games, and my kids played football there. They started at Newcastle Town in their soccer schools. So it was a natural progression. A local club, 5 minutes down the road, and the opportunity to coach there in their academy, but also for me to carry on with Manchester United. So it was I could do that side by side, which was the perfect scenario. Obviously, you can't work for another professional club because of conflict of interest. But this was a perfect scenario. So the relationship started there. Ended up setting up the BTEC program, the football academy. We ran that for 5, 6, 7 years. I was doing the teaching and the coaching at times. So a really good relationship with the club.
And is the focus these days on the boys and their football?
Yeah, it is, because I became first team manager. My boys were just coming through at 19 and 20, my 2 eldest, and they started playing first team football. And my youngest, who got to about 17, he was involved with the first team, and then being able to play him together, at step 4 in the non-league pyramid. Once, he was only 17, my youngest, but that was a really nice thing for me. And then, I made a decision to step away after 6 years of, fighting relegation with a low budget. It becomes frustrating. So I've had 6 years of it, and I thought I'll just step away and let somebody else take over. I was a director at the club, and the 6 years I was there, we managed to clear all the debts. So that was part of the reason I took the first team, coaching young kids to stay in the division. And I thought once we did that, I thought it was the right time for somebody else to come in and maybe take the club forward. But when that happens, they're also in charge of who they pick for the team, and my youngest left to play somewhere else to get game time, and my eldest wasn't sort of fancied enough, so he went to play somewhere else, and I was then left with one of my sons at Newcastle. So I had to divert my time 3 different ways, which wasn't easy. So along came Hanley Town, which is not a local club. The manager there know quite well, and he signed all my 3 boys, and this year they won the league, all 3 playing first team football together, which was an unbelievable season for us, both on the sporting side of it and the social side of it, which we're happy, which is good, and the boys are happy. Not many players win the league, and if you can manage that at least once in your career and do it with your 2 brothers, it's absolutely amazing.
Keeping that Van der Laan name going. I guess we have to finish with something that maybe people aren't aware of. How's your health these days? Because you had a bit of a scare, was it about 10 years ago?
Yeah, I was on my travels with Man United in Saudi Arabia, and I ended up having a heart attack while I was there in the hotel. And luckily it was in Saudi Arabia, because the healthcare is unbelievable. 2 weeks earlier, I was in India, and I don't think I probably would have had the same care there with regards to getting to the hospital, because the roads are absolutely crazy there with regards to how busy it is. So it was a scare. There was a clogged up artery, which they did an angioplasty on it, which is basically putting a stent in. And then I wasn't able to fly for 2 weeks. So I stayed in Bahrain. I drove, we were close to the border for Bahrain, and my wife came over for a week. So it's the first time she left the kids. So she did mention, you do anything to get me away on a holiday together. So we had a sort of a nice time for a week or so in Bahrain.
Well, some good came out of it anyway. Robin, it's been great to talk to you. Just, again, let's finish on Derby. And as we said right at the start, did it seem like last week, or does it really seem 30 years ago? But in the scheme of your career, and in the scheme of certainly Derby's relatively recent history, it was a magical time.
It was a magical time, for all involved. I think not just the players, the management team, the fans, the whole town. I think once you go through a promotion season like that, I think the whole town is buzzing, and just to give people that feeling. Most weekends you win the games and they're going home happy, and it makes the weekends, and you could feel that passion and that joy from everybody around the club, and that was just a magical season.
Robin, thank you. Great chatting. Well, that's the end of season 1 of Life After the Rams. We'll be back in August. Thanks to our guests, to our supporters, Seven, Rams Trust and Mr. Shaw's House, and of course to you for listening. And remember, up the Rams.
Life After the Rams is a Backpass production.